We
There you go.
we are posting it as well. So we're recording now, and I'm going to go into my, we should have a theme song. I don't know what it
Yeah.
would be, but imagine the theme song. And
Uh-oh,
I
she's
know you
frozen.
all. I think it's great to see you. Happy holidays to all of us. Welcome to Dessert and a Movie. Um,
Uh-oh.
I've got to say, oh, are we working? I heard an
Yeah, you kind of cut out a little bit.
uh-oh. Yes, I'm coming to you via Starlink. So I'm
Yeah.
I'm broadcasting from my sumptuous country kitchen here, and we're going to get started. And as always, we are very grateful to Capital Federal for providing funds for Retroactive. We like them very much. We're very grateful, and also Sharon and David Katzman for underwriting our adventures in Retroactive. So we
Yay.
thank them for that.
Hooray.
And we
Uh-oh.
thank them especially for being with us tonight because they're going to be our experts on our ridiculously
Gosh.
wonderful movie, Dreaming of a Jewish Christmas. We chose this film for a number, well, probably the best reason is this year, as you all know, Christmas Day and the first day of Hanukkah fall on the very same day, December 25th. So it seemed very friendly, chummy, and uh, appropriate to watch this film, and we'll get into that in a little bit. I know I am always constrained to ask you what you have or had for dessert. If you want to talk about your dessert, may I? This is what I'm having for dessert. I have a cup of peppermint tea, but this is Kansas at its best. This afternoon, a neighbor came over
Oops.
and gave me a little box of
Oh,
things that she made. There's the little crackers in here and some little candies. And
that's nice.
that's so dear. Do you make things for your neighbors and take them to your neighbors?
Yeah.
Yeah, I did a babka and I gave it to my neighbor.
Uh-huh.
I was thinking about giving my neighbor scones now that I know how to make
Yes,
them.
now that you know. Yeah, and that's what I'm going to do to my neighbors because they actually ask for them. But anyway, so I'm kind of nibbling on this. It's got some little Chex Mix and some little homemade candies. And that's what this season is all about. No matter where you go to church or go to synagogue, it's sharing and giving. So hooray for that. And I'll try not to get too maudlin here so we can get into our program. Anybody else having something lovely for dessert?
Ugh, speak,
Dessert.
speak to the Altmans.
I'm-
So,
Yeah,
Oh.
we kind of delved into my ancient Jewish heritage, which whatever, not a practicing anymore. But I was gonna go the easy way and just make coconut macaroons because that's the easiest and most typical thing. But I haven't had noodle pudding since I was a kid, and it's a delicious sweet dessert that's made out of noodles. It's like bread pudding for a Jew. I don't know what to say. It's
Sounds-
just, it's something
It's
special.
great.
It's
And I have eggnog.
Perfect.
oh,
and a little homemade eggnog with a lot of bourbon in it.
right.
That's our contribution.
Yeah, is that a kugel? A noodle
Yeah,
kugel?
Function
Function
kugel,
kugel.
noodle pudding.
Yeah, lovely.
I'm probably not, I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right, either in Yiddish or German, because my father was from Georgia and his family was from Georgia, so they spoke Yiddish with a Southern accent. So I was corrected over my lifetime many times.
Okay.
I thought maybe Georgia, Russia, Georgia, but
Oh,
No,
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 it's the other one.
no, he came from Poland, Russia, not Georgia, Russia.
and
I have the introduction if you'd like me to begin and if there are no
Yes,
other.
yes.
Oh.
We thought we'd start with
I think
Oh,
that-
Shelley.
I was just gonna point
Sally.
out, I'm following my coconut macaroons with Christmas stolen. So we're both very
I
ecumenical.
always talk about
Yeah.
making stolen to David and he always makes bad jokes about it being hot.
Yeah,
Oh,
I know, I have to, this is what I have to live with.
okay.
I'm going to read this because it's very brief. And although there is the assumption that everybody knows, I'm not sure that's true. During the reign of the Syrian king Antiochus IV, the Great's rule over Judea about 165 BCE, he desecrates the Second Temple, choosing to dedicate it to the Greek god Zeus. And they have a lot of Zeus things, they didn't need another. Narratives in the book of the Maccabees and in Josephus, the Jewish historian, we learn about the holiday then called the Festival of Lights. It was called the Festival of Lights, not Hanukkah. In 165 BCE, approximately 2 years after they've screwed up the temple, Jehuda ha-Maccabi, and he gets that last name ha-Maccabi because it means the hammer. So it's like the Hebrew hammer. He leads a revolt, defeats the Syrian forces, and with his rebels, reconsecrates the temple. Lighting the oil lamp for rededication, they note there's only oil enough for one night, but miraculously the flame lasts for 8 days. And David reminded us of, in 1976 was the bicentennial, we were out of the country and we were in Israel over Christmas, just at that time. And we were in Moadim where the Maccabees lived. And we planted trees to honor our grandmother. They had a forest, and that was part of the celebration of Hanukkah. So because of that oil and the flame lasting for 8 days, we light the Chanukiah, a menorah or candelabrum, for 8 days to celebrate the liberation story. It has one more candle than a usual menorah. We light the shamash, or it's called the attendant, a candle above the rest, and on each night we light the rest of them, one by one for each day until all 8 are lighted. And despite what they said that we only get chocolate coins every night, and that may be a response to Jewish knowledge of Christmas, but we also give gifts to the kids. They're small and they're tokens, but we give gifts each of those 8 nights. A ritual is to place the Hanukkah in a window or other visually obvious place, which can cause problems in Spain and other places, depending upon whether you choose the Sephardic or Ashkenazi definition. Now, Sephardim, we talk about coming from the east, it would be Yemen, it would be Spain, it would be Portugal, and after the Inquisition, they're going to Antwerp, they're going to Holland, they're going to the Caribbean, but that's Sephardic tradition, Italian. And then there's the Ashkenazic tradition from which I descend, as does Altman, and that's, Eastern Europe, Poland, Czechoslovakia, the Scandinavian countries, you name it, they've got it. And so depending upon whether it's Sephardic, they and Israelis do sufganiyot, which are like these donuts with no hole, and they inject them with jam and jelly and stuff. So it's like a jelly donut that are fried. And we, Ashkenazim, we do potato latkes, onions and potatoes grated and fried again in oil. And of course, the generous use of oil reminds us of the miracle of Hanukkah. And I also want to remind myself that you smell like latkes for about 8 days. It's some kind of miracle.
It's so true.
The whole house, the neighborhood, if you open the door, it's unbelievable. It's something miraculous. We celebrate at home with others in shuls and temples as a community. Because one of the questions that we were given is, where do you celebrate it? We celebrate it alone with family together, always, most often as a community, you're having other people and generally. It's a joyous occasion celebrating liberation, but I want to remind everyone it is a minor holiday at best. And that when they talk about, which I just read, and maybe it was also in the film, the holiday which correlates with Christmas is Passover. That is where every Jew somehow travels to celebrate with family, and where it's a much more traditional and celebratory thing that is almost universal. When you're celebrating, it gives you goosebumps, but when you're celebrating Pesach, that there are Jews throughout the world, and I mean globally, who are celebrating that holiday the day before, the day after, and during the holiday. It is the most common to Christmas holiday. And I'm turning it over to David.
Well, first ask, does anyone have any questions? Uh,
Oh, that was
relating
wonderful.
to Hanukkah or anything before we get into discussing the movie?
I did read about it a little. It did say that it is a minor holiday, but people choose to kind of make make it a little bit more prominent in the Jewish religious year or in the temple year because, it falls about the same time as Christmas. And so it's kind of nice to celebrate at the same time.
Mhm.
Well, there's Kwanzaa and there's also Denali. There are a number of.
Yeah,
festivals.
lots of
Right,
stuff. Yeah, it's
right.
winter. Lots of,
Right.
Yeah, chase away the darkness.
yeah,
Make sure the
exactly.
sun comes
The
back.
season of light.
The Druids,
Right. The
everybody.
light returns on the 21st, Saturday. It's the longest night of the
Solstice.
year. It's the solstice, but the light returns. And
Scares
cultures
the hell out of
everywhere
pagans.
always celebrate that.
Yep.
So it's really fun that they're all, and when I taught elementary school, these 3 weeks between Thanksgiving and Christmas, when we're really excited, we would focus on what we called celebrations of light.
Mhm.
And so in the good old public schools of Lawrence, Kansas, we studied all those holidays, and talked about them as equally thrilling.
Yeah.
And so it's very exciting.
When we came to Lawrence in '69, and our children were in school, we were back and forth living in other places. But when we lived here in the early '70s, every classroom had a Christmas tree. And
Mhm.
one of the things we did was take our children out of school a
Early.
week before it was over because learning had stopped in the classrooms. And I served on a committee with a professor in the pharmacy school, Sig Lindenbaum, and there was an examination of rules relating to religion and so forth. And what we got was we took the rules were changed to take out of every classroom a Christmas tree, that there would only be one in every school.
Yeah.
So, and I grew up in New York where there were no Christmas trees in schools. So that
And
was
every
the-
store
that
had
was
not
the
only
compromise.
Merry
But-
Christmas, but Happy Hanukkah, and then later
Mhm.
with Kwanzaa and Denali. I mean,
But, it raises the question to the degree, is Christmas a religious holiday or is it a secular holiday?
Mhm.
And if it's secular, as we were talking before, that it wasn't a day off from work in the United States till late in the 19th century. So that it was a New Year's Day that was the holiday that people didn't work, and because people exchanged. But the degree to which this movie reflects how Jews and other minorities help make it a more of a secular holiday, the degree to which it is an official holiday, does that also signal it's a degree? And also, to what degree is this a secular holiday? Does, for example, the Jewish involvement part of Americanizing? So they're not necessarily to Americanizing or adapting, acculturating to a
assimilating.
religious festival as much as this is part of the secular United States, that they are and other people are all taking part in this large celebration.
Mhm.
I think the priest who was in the film mentioned that the church doesn't own Christmas. He said it isn't he he was pretty much saying it isn't really a religious holiday, particularly. Uh, and I thought that was pretty
Priests I know.
appropriate. People celebrate it whether or not they go to a church. It's mentioned, but it's not.
I'll disagree with that to this extent. I think the answer is yes, it's both.
Yes.
Because to many, many Christians, it is a very religious holiday.
Yes,
Just like to many Jews, minor or not, Hanukkah is a religious holiday. I
right.
grew up very reformed, So I, I think our celebration of both of the holidays to a degree was secular in the sense that it was seasonal, gift giving, whatever. But
Mhm.
we reserved Hanukkah as a much more religious holiday, and we got sticks of gum or an orange for our gifts, which was fine because we used Christmas secularly to exchange gifts.
Mhm.
As did
And-
my
and-
parents.
And our rabbi condoned that. You know, a guy coming, basically the man after the guy who came home from the Pittsburgh platform. So really reformed. So I disagreed a little bit with the priest in the sense that he
Me too.
secularized Christmas as if the religious part of it wasn't part of Christmas. And it is to many, many people. And so that's why I disagree a bit, that I think it's both. I think it's both. And I think that's as it should be.
Yeah,
Right, and
I,
I agree, because growing up in New York, there were a lot of Orthodox people also, and I was aware of January 6th, and I mean, there were a lot of traditions regarding Christmas that were very strictly followed. There was Ukrainian women, you know, Eastern Orthodox and Greek Orthodox. I mean, growing up in such a diverse environment. And I grew up in the Archdiocese of Long Island. Uh, th- I absolutely disagreed with that priest. Was, and continued to be. You know, we were supposed to, they keep, for retirees at KU, they used to have a lovely lunch or dinner, and now they have hors d'oeuvres at the Dole Center. And it was during Vespers, and David and I even hesitated, because when we came, Vespers was very Christian. And now they're adding things, you know, but it was very much a religious holiday. And I absolutely agree.
yeah, I didn't take it that way. He said that the church doesn't own it. I mean, it was a holiday. I didn't take it to mean that
think
it
the
wasn't a
focus-
Christian holiday. And, you know, it is based in the birth of Christ. And of course, many people, you know, whatever. But I thought that was rather generous of him.
Well, it was, but
I
it's
think he
him.
said he shared it. That's
I
like,
think
Yeah,
it-
everyone
yeah,
can
I think
share.
It
Yeah.
was his very generous take on it. I
Mm.
don't think it's the church's take. That's all I'm saying.
I think what he was saying is everybody can share the seasonality.
right.
What
That's
Yes.
what my,
Christmas has become.
yeah.
Everybody cannot share the Christian concept of the birth of Christ or the
Or
belief in
Jesus, which
Christ
I'd like
or
to say, because
whatever.
Christ means savior.
And so I think the secular part of it, that's got its own history going back to Dickens and Tannenbaums and all that stuff, which happened. I think Maureen was telling me in early Boston, you were required to work on Christmas. It was not.
No, it was
you-
colonial.
colonial,
Right, the
Boston,
rules.
colonial
Yeah.
Massachusetts.
Massachusetts.
It wasn't that you could work.
That's in the movie.
You were required, and
Mhm.
you know, we were talking about that, and you know, so it's had different aspects, but the religious part of it for Christians has been a continuum, I think.
Right.
I
David
thought the movie was oh, I'm sorry, Sharon.
was a,
I thought the movie was fantastic because I thought it covered a lot. The opening was absolutely hysterical.
Yeah, it was cute.
The Chinese waiters dancing around like it was Hello Dolly.
Yeah.
And Alana Keegan at why they even asked her what she was doing at Christmas, I have no idea, in her Supreme Court hearings, but when she said, well, like any good Jew, I was probably at a
At a
Chinese.
Chinese-
why do
restaurant.
you think they asked
It
her?
was so
Think
funny.
That was a pointed question?
Exactly, I think so, yeah, don't you?
They were testing her
Pretty-
memory.
Yeah.
Period. She was testifying about some specific things. And so
Oh.
they asked that question to prove that in fact, she probably was exaggerating on these other things. And so using some humor,
When she
She
came
totally
back with that,
deflated,
every Jew who saw that
whole
must
thing.
have fallen down. It was That's where we're
But-
celebrating Christmas with my sister in New York, and guess what? We're having a Chinese meal.
Sounds,
That
that sounds
great.
great.
That's traditional,
Huh.
you know, and it used to be in Lawrence that when on Christmas Day, if you went to the movies, you'd see all your Jewish friends there.
Mhm.
And then it would always be something like what was the Hoo Hoo Kid, the what's his name?
Well, we saw that, the Frisco Kid, we saw once on Christmas Day, on Christmas Eve in Manhattan.
Yeah, it was
Uh,
always
but-
a funny Jewish movie.
But actually, the movies tended to close like at 6 p.m. So they had a
Hmm.
late afternoon movie
Hmm.
and no movie on Christmas Eve or on Christmas evening
I don't,
as
I,
well.
Yeah,
Oh,
now
no.
it's so different. I think that's
yeah, that
packed.
would be,
I'd be interested in what Carola has to say about traditions in Uruguay and elsewhere that she could share with
Mm.
us, because I love the poinsettia that's right next to her.
well,
Let's see. Well, here, I think I'm
I
trying to get
wondered-
Corolla to unmute. Did you want to say something?
Oh, I don't know. Of course, I grew up Christian, but I went to a school where there were Jews too, and I remember there was 3 in our classroom, and they would get off on special holidays when we had to go to school. That's what I remember.
High school too.
As far as Christmas, I mean, living in Uruguay, it was in the summer. And yet we had a Christmas tree, very rudimentary. My dad would put it together with evergreens. But the stores in Montevideo, in the capital, the big stores, they all had displays of snow and sleds and lights,
And those
no
balls.
matter that it was 100 degrees outside.
I love it.
That's
Yes,
great.
we've
That
experienced-
is what I remember.
Yeah.
Mhm.
What does January 6th have to do with Christmas?
Oh,
Isn't
it's the most important. It's probably more important. Actually, if you were really thinking about it in the way we were taught is, it's more important to Gentiles than Christmas, because Christmas was when the Jewish shepherds came to adore,
Mhm.
but the Gentiles don't come until the Epiphany, which is the day the 3 kings.
6. That's the 12th day of
The
Christmas.
12th day of Christmas, yes.
Yeah.
Right, it's
Well,
Epiphany.
And for
And
many
that's-
Christians, that is
That is
the
the day,
celebration
yeah.
day,
Okay.
or some of the days in between, depending on whether you're Russian, Greek, Ukrainian, Armenian. There's the 25th, the 6th, but there are some other days in between that Eastern Orthodox also
Right.
Yes.
celebrate instead.
Our
So
friend
it's a
Ksenia, right?
little,
And I totally bank on the 12 days of Christmas because if you get a gift from me or a card anytime around January 3rd, I'm good.
You're covered, you're
I mean,
covered.
That's
I
right.
totally, every Christmas card I write has a disclaimer that there are 12 days of Christmas. And considering the state of the United States postal system, think-
That's fair.
I think we have to just let that kind of happen the way it does. Sharon and David, what did you think of? I mean, the whole thing was tongue in cheek. I mean, the little girl getting served the snowman made out of 2 balls of rice
I love
and the
that.
dancing people and the maracas going on with the rice sticks and everything. I mean, the
The
whole.
maracas were also made of MSG. They were two.
Oh.
Yeah,
I couldn't
please.
have that.
Hold the MSG. But I mean, they kind of were, it made me a little sad. I mean, they're kind of saying that people who are Jews feel left out. Or that, how did they put it? That they feel a little guilty, handing out gifts and all that. And I thought, that cannot be right. And I want to speak to the comment about the Christmas trees. I started teaching in elementary school here in Lawrence in about the 80s. And we had all kinds of songs and all kinds of, we didn't really focus on it, but I'm afraid if you could see around my kitchen, there's a lot of twinkle lights. I had a little Christmas tree and I had a little wreath on my door, and the principal, a lovely woman, came in and asked me if I would pose by them, because when we had the faculty meeting later on in the day, these were examples of what we should not be doing.
Right.
Oh,
So it's like,
you were the
Absolutely.
poster child.
you know, and like, and we were told that they have to go. You
Yeah.
know, we really should not have those. So everybody said fine. And we kind of
Twinkle lights
centered
are
in on
okay.
snowflakes and snowmen.
Yeah.
Snowflake, snowman, twinkle lights, fine. A Christmas tree, verboten.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
And
So
I don't think guilt is involved. They overdo Jewish guilt. We don't, everybody
Kinda like
else
Catholic
feels
guilt.
guilty instead of us. They should feel guilty over us. But no, I just, go ahead, honey.
I, I, I think yes, there is some Jewish, both guilt and also some children being excluded. For example, if a Jewish family doesn't exchange gifts on Christmas, and they're going to be making in the classroom gifts for parents and to be exchanged, that places a Jewish child, and we're speaking of Jewish, but it would be a non-Christian child, not just Jewish children, in a very difficult place. What do you do in those kinds of
And they
um,
always had Christmas
uh,
parties.
circumstances? And so there is, for many Jewish families, a rather tense time that the children feel drawn between what they see as the practice and values of their parents and the practice and values of a teacher who is leading this in the classroom.
And think of all the lights
There's-
in the
there's al-
neighborhood. Oh,
There's also a
Gorgeous.
case where often happens in school where a teacher might turn to one or two Jewish children and say, please explain Hanukkah to the class. Whereas the teacher, if there's going to be an explanation, will explain Christmas. And that also creates tension for a child who's clearly not equal to a teacher and can't provide the same kind of information and feels put on the spot. I'm a longtime member of the ACLU. I believe in that public schools should be secular and so forth. So that's an important value that I bring, that my children shared. And not all Jews bring that value, but for us it was. And that meant the children were in a particular
Christmas
difficult
is
position.
so gorgeous and so glitzy.
Yeah.
It's really hard. It is still hard for me. I go around and I say, David, slow down, slow down. Look at that, fabulous display these
Mm.
people are making, and all the lights and the Santas that are big blow-ups that fell down on the lawn. And I love
Mm.
every inch of it. And, I always thought, it's kind of shabby, our stuff, compared to all this. And then I would also, my parents had a Christmas tree. We exchanged gifts. It was totally assimilated, never went to temple. It's an irony considering my husband and my life. But laugh. It really is a fascinating thing, but you do feel absolutely excluded from this fabulous, shining thing, and particularly when you're a child. I mean, later when I'd be shopping and I'd hear, and it isn't as bad, but there'd be constant, probably written by Jews, carols being sung. Oh, Lord God, the constant turnover of in between Kmart's blue light special and the constant Christmas carols, and plus the obnoxious commercials on television. And it's endless. It's endless and it's overwhelming. And it's very hard not to feel left out if you're a kid, and even as an adult, you feel, oh my God, what's going on?
I had a little different or do have a little different take, and I think I had a little different take as a kid too, but because, you know, we always talk about the Christmas tree as the symbol of Christian, you can't have it in the classroom. Or if you're gonna have that, you have to have the Hanukkah menorah, so you have equal time and that kind of nonsense. But this is an interesting point, because the Hanukkah menorah is strictly a religious symbol.
Absolutely.
The Christmas tree is a pagan symbol and has nothing to do with the religious part of Christian.
And was brought though from.
Nor the
German-
ornaments, nor any of this stuff. And I can't say as a kid, I understood that. I don't think I did. You know, we had the option to sit out the Christmas pageant, or we didn't have that. We had the choir, or we could sing the non-religious songs and then sit out, whatever. And I never really, I think my family and I were less concerned with how I felt about the Christmas carols in the school than they were about the fact that I could only go to 10 colleges and not all the colleges I wanted to go
Right,
to.
right.
So I think we had a different sense, and we're Midwesterners. But I think it was a different kind of priority, but I never really understood the equivalency of the Christmas tree as any sort of religious
Interesting.
symbol, and that it would be equal to, quote unquote, a Hanukkah menorah in a school. When, you know, the 10 Commandments, maybe, yeah, but not
Well,
the
the
Christmas
nativity
tree.
scene.
Or the nativity scene, for
It's
sure.
also Driving Miss Daisy showed me about Reform Judaism and its hold in Southern culture. And I have a branch of the family in North Carolina. And I could see that it's very different, your experience from my experience as a Northeasterner. Did you want to say you had something? And
Well, the other part is in terms, the movie shows a way of relating to it. That is the degree to which there is an underlying commercial element, so that non-Christian storekeepers, so when you know, especially in the Midwest, Jews in small towns often were merchants and peddlers, as Syrians began to come to the United States in the 1880s and 90s. And some of you may know, an example I always use is the Syrian kind of peddler in Oklahoma. So you're getting these people who not participating in Christmas, but clearly seeing it as a commercial venture and contributing to defining it then in secular terms. There's no question that all these non-Jewish merchants throughout the Midwest decorated their stores, stocked all things for Christmas and so forth. And so that helped in part to turn it into the degree as a secular holiday. And, you know, to what degree do these songwriters, the degree to which one of the things that many of us in American studies study is that popular culture was available to minorities in the United States. And because those people who controlled many institutions devalued it. And so, you know, popular songs, later
comic books.
dance, comic books, radio,
Movies.
Hollywood, TV were all available to minorities to come in. I should say before World War II, because Blacks were kind of pushed out of some of these popular culture that they had been very important prior to
Music,
World War II.
especially.
But so that reflects the degree that it's a point of entry into American culture where they can be part of it without feeling separate from that culture. Is
They
that
mentioned-
part
yeah.
of the story that the movie is presenting?
Yeah, they did mention, I like the one fellow that said, you know, you're a songwriter. You're writing popular music. You want a hit.
Mm.
And
And
you're gonna write for the biggest audience because the more records you sell, the more you're considered to have a hit. And so if you're writing for 3% of the population, not many people are gonna go out and buy a song about a dreidel. Or gee, honey, what great kugel you make, I mean, whatever. They're not gonna, if you're trying to sell a product. But I thought that was brilliant because the songs are beautiful songs, just like every beautiful song, every popular song touches a place in your heart. Um, a White Christmas coming right after the bombing of Pearl Harbor. Um, Dreaming of a White Christmas, and I'll Be Home for Christmas. It has nothing to do really with Christmas as much as it has to do with
A
home,
holiday and being home.
being
Right.
home.
During
Family.
wartime.
being
Yeah, and being with your family and the things that we remember.
right,
The
absolutely.
chestnuts, whatever. I never had chestnuts roasting on an open fire. I grew up in Chicago. We had bratwurst.
You'd pass the oil can, fires in New York, and there'd be this smoke coming through, and they'd be roasting chestnuts.
Hmm.
And I never,
Did this have any impact, do you think, in shaping Christmas in American culture and
the
society?
songs, you mean?
Yeah.
So
Oh, I
they're,
think
they're beautiful
absolutely.
songs.
Yeah.
There
They
would be no Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer without a song. It
Right.
The
just
guy
wouldn't
who wrote
exist,
it lived next door to us.
You
in
know, I mean, it's,
Queens.
but the one thing that I found that's interesting, they talked about all the popular songs and how many of the most popular are written by Jews. But the one thing they didn't really talk about, and they didn't jump too much on the fact that what percentage of the songwriters in Tin Pan Alley were Jewish, which was pretty high. But what they didn't do is they didn't talk about, and I could be wrong, you guys are the New Yorkers, music and theater were tremendously important in New York. The Yiddish theater was a huge thing. So there would be many people, professional and non-professional, who would be singers, violin players, musicians,
Absolutely.
actors already, because that they brought that from the old country. I mean, their
Yeah.
music was always important from what my family told me to the Jews that immigrated.
Mhm.
So it wasn't just opportunistic. I mean, there was,
No,
exclusion wasn't just opportunistic that that many
Traditional.
songwriters were Jewish. It was cultural to a degree, if I understand it correctly.
Yeah.
right.
You New Yorkers can advise me on this,
No,
but
that's true. And I know, well, we're familiar with Gershwin particularly because he was a family friend of my father-in-law, who was a songwriter, composer, musician. And I remember thinking about, oh God, I've just blanked his name, but Chestnuts Roasting by the Open
Mel
Fire.
Torme.
Yeah.
Mel Torme, and then
Nat King Cole.
thank you, Nat Jazz, a
Nat
jazz.
King Cole, yeah.
And his voice always haunts me with that song. I mean, I always think of it.
I thought that was an interesting point about
Yes.
how
Yeah.
Mel Torme asked Nat King Cole to sing it as a
And I
way.
thought the story about Rudolph, I never
Mhm.
thought of it that way.
yeah, neither.
It was
Yeah, I thought that was
amazing.
interesting.
I was taking it to an interesting degree, but feeling left out and all that.
Makes
Yeah,
sense, and the emphasis on the nose, absolutely.
I know.
Yeah.
I haven't heard from the Berengers. Do you have anything that you want to talk about your childhood or your adulthood or your anything?
Yes, I'm going to share what happened in my grammar school in the Los Angeles area. The school district didn't have enough money to have a music program every day like Lawrence does. We had a music teacher that came in once a week. And our music teacher, throughout my first 6 years of grammar school, she was Jewish. Well, I didn't know that, but she was. And so when it came to be Christmas time, and it was time to, sing songs like we always sang songs, we would sing dreidel, 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 and "O Hanukkah, O Hanukkah, come light the menorah."
Oh, God,
She
yes.
had the whole class doing this, and it was never said, "Oh, these are Hanukkah Jewish songs. We just grew up, okay, this is what we sang,
Just as I
in
sang the
class.
Messiah,
Yeah,
right?
it was really
And
fun.
that is really interesting because I was shocked when Jane Sonnenschein said she wouldn't sing. She was a member of the Choraleers also, and I was an alto and look forward to that fabulous feeling you get when you have the Messiah being sung all around you and the
Oh, yeah.
chorus. And she wouldn't because it talks about Jesus being the savior and all the rest, and she asked to be excluded and not marked down in her classroom. And I went, that's weird. The Messiah almost sounded secular, but I mean, I've learned since then about its history, but still it was what one did.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Yeah, I think
interesting.
it's important to celebrate everything, I think.
Yeah, Jill, it's
all
interesting
fun.
that was-
Another point, which when I watched the movie and they said that all the Jewish families go to Chinese restaurants and they go to the movies, I about fell on the floor because my best friend was a little Jewish girl and we're still close today. And her family always went to a Chinese restaurant and they went to a movie.
You got it.
I sometimes went with them to the restaurant, but I had to be home for the, evening. And in Los Angeles, you could go to a movie at night on the 24th. Yeah.
Well, it's sunnier
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I suppose.
It's black.
I
it's
think
night.
going to a movie on Christmas is very popular among
Oh,
all
it's
cultures
packed.
now.
It's probably their
Well,
busiest day of the year.
That's what
Really?
people
Yeah.
do.
Yeah,
It
because we
was
would have,
always deserted.
Got
in
your
Lawrence
whole
except
family.
for the-
well, because now it's like we
Everybody
have
entertain 'em.
Christmas lunch and then everybody goes to the movie at night. So,
Yeah, exactly.
yeah.
I
mean,
missed the nighttime during the daytime-ish area. There were just Jews. There were maybe a dozen people.
Which, on Christmas Day, movie theaters were among the few places that were open.
Everybody
mhm.
was opening
Um,
presents.
That bowling alleys tended to close, and so in part because movie theater only needed one or two, maybe three people at the maximum to hold
And take
that.
tickets, right?
That others needed much more people, and of course, the Chinese restaurants were the only restaurants
Mhm.
that were open as a group. One of the things I asked about in terms of January 6th is that part of the reason for January 6th is that the Western Church adopted the Gregorian calendar and the Eastern Church did not. For example, the
Still
shift of
Justinian.
12 days in the birth of George Washington. He was because of that
He was
Gregorian.
Justinian,
The
right.
12 days of Christmas were created because the Eastern Orthodox continued to celebrate what had been and therefore it was January 6th, whereas the West had, under the new Gregorian calendar, shifted the
They were
calendar
the
12
Justinian
days.
calendar.
And so in communities, parts of Chicago, for example, where you have heavy Orthodox communities, or in New York, Christmas Day in itself was not much of a holiday. Much of it was on January 6th. And the kind of merger of those two things created the 12 days of Christmas, but also is a reminder that that to say it's a Christian holiday or a Christian nation or something, there's a lot of diversity among Christians as well.
there is.
And that's not oft thought of because the groups didn't mix a lot before really the 1960s and 70s, when you then began to get a lot of mix. The other thing about the film that immediately struck me, and I may say it in part because I am a scholar of North America. So I study Canada, to a certain degree, Mexico, as well as the United States, because I see cultural lines north-south, not east-west. It's a Canadian film.
Yeah, I thought that was
The
interesting.
majority of the talking heads in the film
2/3.
are Canadian. Did that strike anyone as, I
Yeah,
mean,
including the head singer of Bare Naked Ladies. I had to look him up. I didn't know who he was. The
But
guy
the-
waiting for his takeout.
does that say anything about, I mean, it's always like, I used to teach, of course, the greatest interpreter of American culture was a Frenchman,
De
Tocqueville.
Tocqueville.
Does it sometimes take an outsider to look at American culture in ways that we are so familiar and accustomed that it's hard to raise some of these questions and look at it? Strike anyone as?
That's an interesting point. I think just a
Did it
lot of,
feel Canadian to anybody? Or did it feel American?
I don't know too much about Canada. I only hear that 90% of the population lives within 10 miles of the United States border.
20
Yeah.
miles.
I don't know if that's exactly true, but
I don't,
Self-preservation, unless you're in.
It's also much more of a, they live in apartments, much more
uh-huh.
urban than the United States, but there are also large divisions, and in the world, post-Holocaust world, two of the centers of Yiddish language are in Canada. Winnipeg and Montreal have tremendous Yiddish-speaking cultures and have even preserved it today. The others are, of course,
the good
New York
Nutcrackers.
and Buenos Aires are the other New World centers of Yiddish civilization. But so that, and they're very different than the United, there's official religions, right? So we cannot ask people's religion in the census. Canada, with the British tradition, does ask that question.
Well, the Brits,
So, it's has to do with First Amendment and
I know.
another thing, so that there are different traditions. So I found that it was
we're
a
talking
Canadian
about
film
tradition.
interesting.
Look at Corolla. Do you
Yeah.
see that there's the king?
Yeah.
You see her nutcrackers?
Mhm.
And we see the Nutcracker Ballet.
I see the Nutcrackers.
And the Nutcracker
Yeah.
Ballet is always in New York and here as well. And Kansas City Ballet is putting it on. And that just becomes a real tradition.
Yeah, and it's a holiday. It's snowflakes. It's
Fun.
light. It's light in the winter, light in every way. Illumination and light. Just
Yeah.
let's be happy, let's warm each other up. Let's listen to my ridiculous
Actually
cuckoo
afraid
clock.
of the dark. It's really very primal, very primal. When it's that dark, that's early and lasts that long, it is scary. And there
Yeah.
are witches and goblins and all that kind of stuff. If you're a pagan, you're scared out of your mind. And
Yes.
not only pagans. Yeah, I won't even say pagans, actually. I mean, because the minds, people are respected as being much more intelligent and aware of things. But when the sun goes away, it's scary. That's all.
Mhm. I appreciate the lights on Massachusetts Street, the
Oh,
lights
me
that people
too.
put
So
on their
pretty.
homes, in the
I'm
darkness.
heartbroken because there was a guy on, what was the name of the street, who had
Ranchero?
animation and it was
Oh, yeah.
Park
written
Circle.
up and everything. And I went back to see, and he must have sold his house.
Is that the one that was out south?
Yeah,
Or
yeah,
is it,
what is the name?
or was the one there?
Ranchero off
Oh,
the,
right. I remember that one.
oh my God, he had hand carved out of wood and other things. He had animation and he had Disney figures and he had Santa and he had everything.
It's a lot of work.
Because it was traditional in our house to go to Ranchero. I begged David, let's go see what he's done this year because he added something every year.
Yeah,
And
it's
yeah.
fun.
we always knew in our cul-de-sac, there would be all the lights and there'd be one little dark house in the middle. That was us.
Ah,
Very pitiful.
Yeah.
It's such a lovely time of year, and I wanted to say that I wanted to ask you about that too. ultimately, it felt like, there's differences. The sentiment is the same. Family, being together, being warm, sharing the light, whatever the light may be, whatever the wisdom may be.
And liberation and joy. I mean, the birth
Joy, the feast,
and
whatever the feast is, if it's
idea-
fried or if it's baked, it's the feast. My neighbor, I have a neighbor out here. His name's Carl Burns. It was originally Birnbaum. And he grew up in the Bronx. And he said in his neighborhood, there was nobody but Jews and Irish people. And and he didn't even know there was anything other than Catholics
Me too,
until he moved to the Midwest.
me too.
And just little, but there's so many similarities. We have so much in common. And the other thing I wanted to do is a shout out to the Jews in every single way. The Jewish people are contemporaries of the Abyssinians and the Chaldeans and the Babylonians, and I don't know anybody who identifies as Babylonian.
Or Phoenician.
They have been around forever. When I started reading the Christian Bible, I read that the Jews were God's chosen people,
Yeah, go choose somebody else. for
and he
one.
loves them forever and ever and ever. And I thought to myself, as a 30-year-old woman, where can I find one?
Except that this story of liberation is from the Assyrian general Assaracus. And the Syrians are still around and they're in the news today.
Well, that's very true. They've changed their name.
Powerful force,
Just-
and
they
they're here.
Just got maybe free again, maybe.
Yeah,
No,
yeah.
I think your point, Laurel, is really well taken. And it's true, there is a large amount of commercialization, but it's not just of Christmas, it's of everything. But if we kind of slide that over from commercialization of Christmas to the universalization
Yes.
of the Christmas spirit, then maybe we would have accomplished,
Right.
that sense of
Yes.
everybody has a path. They get to choose their path. We should all be rowing in the same direction.
Amen.
Absolutely.
Amen, as we say.
And that was, yeah.
No,
Oh, yeah,
I-
I knew I saw that somewhere.
Just universal,
yeah.
and that
what
was the
David
point.
was mentioning, and I don't know whether Shelley remembers, but it used to be that there were people in the Jewish community who volunteered to work for anybody who had to work on Christmas in the
Mhm.
town,
It's nice.
so that they could celebrate Christmas. I thought it was very unfair that their bosses would not let them celebrate Christmas with their families. But that was a big sale day, I guess, and so Jews came in and took their places. And that
Mhm.
sense of universality and helping one another out.
Mhm.
The only thing that shocks me is because since Chabad came to town, is there is a menorah lighting, and that just,
And the menorah lighting at the library on December
I
25th,
know, it
Next
just-
Is it
November.
26?
26
26th.
It's on the
on the
26th.
lawn.
I've been to that.
Mhm.
does, it
It's
does.
it's quite a rumpus.
Yes.
It was really fun, but also I was remembering too, I didn't study the Bible. I celebrated Christmas as a child, but I didn't know anything about God much other than um, God was mentioned when people were upset. But
Indeed.
I remember when I was in high school, I had a caroling party. I thought because I knew no one. I was lonesome. I felt left out. My nose was enormous, whatever. And so I invited a bunch of girls I knew to come to my house and go caroling. And there was one girl named Debbie Rabinowitz. And I called Debbie Rabinowitz up and I said, "Would you like to come to my caroling party?" And she said, "I don't know. I'll ask my parents." And I had no idea that I'd stepped over
You
some,
didn't, she
you
was
know,
gonna
had
check her
I-
parents. Did she
I
go?
had, yeah,
Did
and she came.
That's great.
Yeah, no, I went caroling. I knew all the songs, including
Yeah.
including all the religious ones.
We pretty
Well-
much stuck with Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer and Frosty, and when we got to Silent Night, there was a little quiet over there, but we pretty much figured it out. So
There was almost a part of that movie that made me want to watch it with Chinese immigrant family.
Yeah,
Because
agreed.
some of the things they said, I thought, I wonder how like this really rings
Mhm.
with them.
Yeah, I
mean,
was upset, actually.
Were you
Yeah, I had mixed
too
feelings.
silly, too much
David enjoyed
focus
the
on?
film, and I know most people did, but I was really growing up and
Very lucrative time.
Yeah.
and because of the Chinese thing, I really was upset that they, like the women with the maracas, but they weren't maracas, it said MSG on them. They were MSG capsules. And then when the guy is cooking, he's pouring MSG and you can see in big letters. And,
See that.
you know, David said, relax about the lion dance, but there was some uneasiness I had. It was almost as if it was a black minstrel. It
Mm.
just,
You
it
do, you
made
do
me.
know that, I'm sorry, you do know that this story about MSG is false, huh?
No, I understand.
Okay.
He's talking about umami and all that
Right,
nonsense.
right.
But
Yeah.
the point is that there was this
Right.
kind,
It was a
Yeah.
little minstrel show. you know.
Yeah,
and I felt goosey. I'm just
but
aware of.
But it
was
was
a financially lucrative time for
True,
them. And
true.
Oh,
that
no, no,
you know.
listen, I'm going to a Chinese restaurant on Christmas. And it's only because.
And they're busy.
We're not
Yeah.
going to the movies,
I'm
so.
kind
you
of surprised
know.
they're open though, because there's a lot of Christian Chinese. I guess it's
Yeah.
just the tradition of being open, but
Tradition.
this is
That's
a
right.
lot, awful lot of people who
I
are.
think early in the Warriors or whatever, there were less, because I think there was more proselytization of non-Catholic Christian people
Right.
going over after the war and even later, so that a
Right.
lot of the Chinese and Japanese Christians became that later.
It's very
I
Methodist.
understand. I mean, even our rabbi was asked to come to Japan because people were looking to convert to Judaism, which I found really weird. He was a chaplain in the war, came back to the temple, and he actually took some time off to go to Japan at the request of Japanese people
Well, a lot of Catholic
to be
priests were over
a
in
Jewish
China.
missionary. I'd never heard of such
Yeah.
a thing.
No, that's not what Jews do. Proselytizing is actually forbidden.
Yeah. In his case, I think
sorry,
it was
I'm
more
sorry,
explaining.
sorry.
I mean, he didn't call himself a missionary. It was more he called it education.
Educational journey.
But he said there were those who chose to convert.
Poor things.
I don't know. I was very surprised.
Many of the colleges in China established in the 19th century were Christian colleges
Yeah.
that were part proselytizing and part
The good
higher
earth.
education.
Yeah.
So that was
A
amazing.
lot of Methodists that I
Uh,
That
know.
was the earlier thing. So
Well, for
Mhm.
many of the women who graduated from KU before World War I, being a missionary was one among the small number of occupations that were open to
To
women.
women.
You could teach
Mhm.
school,
And think of what
You
an
could be,
adventure it would be getting away
a
from
nurse,
home.
and a lot were missionaries because they had little choice if they wanted to do
Mhm.
some things in terms of culture and civilization.
How many people love
Uh,
this movie? Would you raise your
Yes,
hand?
it's time to ask how did you
love
feel
it.
about the movie?
Yep.
Give it a
Oh.
rating.
Real
I
fun.
I give it a 4.
I loved
Do
it.
ratings.
It was fun. I mean,
Yeah,
Yeah,
it
it's
was,
fun.
I felt it was kind of fun, it
Enjoyed it.
was kind of ridiculous, but it was kind of fun.
Yeah.
It was
Yeah.
a
Covered a lot of
satire.
different ideas too.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I thought it was,
I think
Femi-
my favorite part was the "Do you hear what I hear?"
that was
Oh,
lovely.
yes.
That
Yes,
was very,
the
very
boy
beautiful.
Yes.
too. And that
Pray
reminded me
for
of the whole
peace.
thing about Nat King Cole.
yeah.
That was all great.
Yeah.
Well, I see by the old clock on the corner of my laptop that it's 8:02, so I suppose our time is up. Come back next
Give
month.
David
Yeah, I
one more
just got-
time.
Yep.
I'm going to flip it just to take a minute, and that is, are there any Jewish holidays that became kind of secular holidays?
I don't
And
think so.
I'll tell you of one, that
Please.
3 points in time. So the holiday of Purim,
Gosh.
which is a holiday that you
Midwestern.
can dress up, you can cross all kinds of
You
lines.
can get drunk,
you
which you
can get
don't
drunk and
in
so forth.
Judaism.
So in the Caribbean in the 17th century, it was widely celebrated as a holiday that non-Jews and Jews shared.
Carnival,
in
carnival.
New York,
Ah,
in New York from the 1860s to the 1890s, the New
Christmas.
York Purim Ball was among the 4 or 5 most important social
And
events
what about
in
in
New York.
Kansas, David?
And in Leavenworth, from the 1860s to the 1880s, Purim was rivaled St. Patrick's Day as the most important public holiday that everybody wanted to get an invitation to go to the ball.
I blew it. I almost made Hamantash for tonight.
I was gonna say, is
So
that,
it's
That
I mean,
close.
a really
is that,
interesting.
is that Haman and Mordecai and Esther?
Yeah.
Haman, Mordecai, and
Right.
yes, yes,
And so
Hamantash
you
are
remember,
cookies that are Haman's hats. They're triangle.
right. The
who,
triangular hat.
famous General Armstrong,
Custer.
Esther?
So Custer was head of the fort in 1870, 71. And he and all of his officers dressed into costume and went to the
Yeah, they talked about
Purim
this big
Ball
blonde
in
soldier.
Leavenworth, and that gave it a boost, that put it on the calendar, helped make it the most important of the balls every spring
I love that.
for 2 decades. So
And now we celebrated at the library. We call it the after hours at the library, right?
But it's Saturday, and I
Oh.
often can't come.
yeah.
Well,
So-
Well, let's give a big round of applause to the Katzmans. Thank you. You guys, it was really fun.
thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
And thank you all for showing up and being here tonight. And it's dark and it's cold, but here we are all together. So
And Shelley, you look beautiful.
Oh, thank you.
You. Great lighting, Shelley.
Not
You
that
come
you
to our
don't
house and do my
look
lighting.
Lighting.
She's even better looking when she's playing the recorder. for
Oh,
those of you
I
who
missed
missed
that.
it.
I know. I heard that was
She was
great.
wonderful.
We did not miss it, and it was great. So next year.
I didn't
we'll
know
Well,
that.
certainly
That's
go-
right, we will celebrate Christmas with a recorder program.
There you
Alright.
go.
sounds
It'll
really
be the
good.
Shelley fan club.
Can you learn dreidel, dreidel, dreidel?
Oh, God. Please don't.
Please.
I have
The
to,
worst
I have
song
to
ever.
learn how to transpose first. I only have like 1 key, maybe 2 keys. I can
Don't fit in.
Yeah.
Thank you for
Yeah.
having us. It's really
Yeah.
nice to be able to
Thank
share.
you,
Thank
thank
you.
you
Oh,
for
it was
sharing
fun.
all that
Being
knowledge,
here
both of
and-
you.
Yes.
Yeah, that was
Happy,
awesome.
happy holidays to all of you. Bye.
Yes.
And Merry Christmas.
Thank you so much,
Be
David.
well and safe.
Bye.
I can wish
for a healthy new year and peaceful new year.
and a peaceful.
Happy
New Year.
New Year.